The city buzzed with life as cars honked and people rushed to their destinations. Among them was a man in his late 40s, dressed in simple clothes, worn-out jeans and a plain t-shirt. No one would guess he was the CEO of one of the most popular restaurant chains in the country. But that was the point. He had decided to go undercover in his own restaurant. Not as the boss, but as a new employee. He wanted to see the real workings of his business, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Too many reports, too many meetings, but he needed to experience it himself. The restaurant was busy, as usual. The smell of grilled meat and fresh bread filled the air. Laughter and chatter mixed with the clinking of glasses. He walked in, nerves twisting in his stomach. What if someone recognized him? What if this whole idea backfired? The manager, a stern-faced man with tired eyes, barely glanced at him. "You the new guy?" he asked, not even waiting for an answer before thrusting an apron at him. "Wash your hands and start with the dishes. We're short-staffed today." And just like that, he was in. No special treatment, no red carpet. Just another worker in the chaos. The dishwashing area was hot and steamy. His hands plunged into soapy water as plates and glasses piled up. Around him, the kitchen staff moved like a well-oiled machine, shouting orders, chopping vegetables, grilling steaks. But beneath the surface, he sensed tension. A young cook, barely out of his teens, muttered under his breath as he wiped sweat from his forehead. "Another day, another dollar. If they even pay us properly this time." The CEO's ears perked up. Pay issues? He kept his head down but listened closely. Nearby, two servers rushed past, balancing trays. "I swear, if that guy at table 7 snaps his fingers at me one more time." One of them hissed. The other sighed. "Just ignore it. We need the tips." The CEO's stomach tightened. He had always believed his company treated employees well. Good wages, fair policies, or so he thought. But here, in the trenches, the story seemed different. As the hours dragged on, his back ached, his hands were raw, and his feet throbbed. But worse than the physical strain were the whispers, the quiet complaints, the frustration in the workers' voices. Then, during a short break, he overheard something that made his blood run cold. A group of employees huddled in the back, speaking in hushed tones. "Did you hear? They're cutting hours again," one said. Another scoffed. "Of course. More profit for them, less for us. And good luck paying rent this month." The CEO's heart pounded. This wasn't just a few unhappy workers, this was a real problem. A problem he had unknowingly allowed to happen. His mind raced. How long had this been going on? How many people were struggling because of decisions made in some distant office? Just then, the manager's sharp voice cut through his thoughts. "Break's over. Get back to work." As he returned to the dish pit, his hands moved automatically, but his mind was elsewhere. He had come here to observe, but now he realized, he had to do more than just watch. Because what he had overheard didn't just shock him. It changed everything. The next few hours passed in a blur of steam, sweat, and soapy water. The CEO's hands were red and wrinkled, his muscles sore from standing in one spot for so long. But the physical exhaustion was nothing compared to the storm in his mind. Every whispered complaint, every tired sigh from the staff echoed in his head. He had built this company from the ground up, or so he thought. But now, standing in the kitchen, he realized how disconnected he had become. A sudden crash snapped him out of his thoughts. One of the servers had dropped a tray of glasses. Shards scattered across the floor, and the manager's face turned red. "Clean it up. And that's coming out of your pay," he barked. The server, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes, flinched. "But, it was an accident," she said weakly. The manager didn't even look at her. "Should have been more careful." The CEO clenched his jaw. Docking pay for a mistake? That wasn't company policy. He made a mental note, another problem to address. As he scrubbed another stack of plates, a voice beside him made him jump. "You new here?" It was the young cook from earlier, the one who had muttered about pay. Up close, he looked even younger, probably still in his early 20s. His apron was stained, his hair messy under a worn-out cap. "Yeah, first day," the CEO replied, keeping his tone casual. The cook snorted. "Good luck. This place chews people up." He grabbed a rag and wiped his hands. "I've been here 6 months, and it's only gotten worse." The CEO hesitated. "How so?" The cook glanced around, then lowered his voice. "They keep cutting hours, but the workload's the same. And good luck getting overtime. They'll find a way not to pay you." A knot formed in the CEO's stomach. "That doesn't sound legal." The cook shrugged. "Try proving it. They make sure nothing's in writing." Before the CEO could respond, the manager's voice cut through the kitchen. "Hey! No chit-chat. Get back to work." The cook rolled his eyes and walked away, leaving the CEO with a heavy feeling in his chest. Lunch rush came and went. The crowd thinned, and the kitchen finally got a brief moment of calm. The CEO was wiping down counters when he noticed an older dishwasher, a man in his 50s with rough hands and a quiet demeanor, leaning against the wall, rubbing his lower back. "You okay?" the CEO asked. The man gave a tired smile. "Just old bones. This job's harder than it used to be." The CEO nodded sympathetically. "How long have you worked here?" 12 years, the man said. "Seen a lot of changes. Not all good." The CEO hesitated, then decided to push a little. "Like what?" The dishwasher sighed. "Used to be, if you worked hard, they took care of you. Now? It's all about cutting corners. Less staff, more work. And the pay." He shook his head. "I got a kid in college. Don't know how much longer I can do this." The words hit the CEO like a punch. This man had given over a decade to the company, and now he was struggling to keep up. By the end of his shift, the CEO's feet ached, his back was stiff, and his mind was racing. He clocked out quietly, avoiding eye contact, and stepped outside into the cool evening air. For the first time in years, he didn't head to his luxury car. Instead, he walked. He needed to think. His phone buzzed, a message from his assistant. "Board meeting tomorrow. Quarterly profits are up. They'll be happy." Profits were up. But at what cost? He thought about the young cook, the server who'd been docked pay, the dishwasher who'd given 12 years of his life. These weren't just employees, they were people. People who were being squeezed dry so the numbers looked good on paper. He stopped walking, staring at his reflection in a store window. The man looking back at him wasn't the powerful CEO. Right now, he was just another tired worker. And he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't right. Something had to change. The next morning, the CEO woke up with a stiff back and a racing mind. His hands still felt rough from the dishwashing soap, a stark reminder of the previous day. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the worker's words in his head. "This place chews people up. They make sure nothing's in writing. Don't know how much longer I can do this." He couldn't shake the guilt. For years, he had trusted reports and middle managers to tell him how the business was running. But now he knew, those reports didn't show the whole story. He dressed quickly, skipping his usual tailored suit for another plain outfit. He wasn't done yet. The restaurant was quieter in the early hours before the lunch rush. A few staff members prepped ingredients, their movements slow with tiredness. The manager wasn't around yet, just a shift supervisor, a woman in her 30s with a clipboard in hand. She looked up as the CEO walked in. "You're back," she said, not unkindly. "Guess you survived day one." He forced a smile. "Barely." She handed him an apron. "Today, you're on prep duty. Chop vegetables, stock the fridge, simple stuff." He nodded and got to work, but his real mission wasn't chopping onions. It was listening. As he sliced tomatoes beside a quiet older woman, he decided to test the waters. "Busy place," he remarked. She didn't look up. "Always is. Never enough people." He hesitated. "Do they hire often?" She let out a dry laugh. "They say they're hiring. But half the time, new people quit within a week. The ones who stay? They have no choice." He frowned. "No choice?" She finally glanced at him, her eyes sharp. "You got another job lined up? Savings?" "Most of us don't." The knife in his hand suddenly felt heavy. A commotion near the back door caught his attention. The young cook from yesterday was arguing with the shift supervisor. "I can't work a double today," he said, voice strained. "I told you, I have night classes." The supervisor crossed her arms. "Either cover the shift or don't bother coming back tomorrow." The cook's face flushed with anger, but after a tense silence, his shoulders slumped. "Fine. I'll stay." As he stormed off, the CEO's grip tightened on the knife. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. Later, during a short break, he found the cook smoking outside the back door, his expression grim. "Rough day?" the CEO asked carefully. The cook exhaled sharply. "Just another Tuesday." He flicked ash off his cigarette. "You know how much they pay me? Barely enough for rent, forget school. And if I say no to a shift? Gone." The CEO hesitated, then took a risk. "What if someone higher up knew? The owner, maybe?" The cook laughed bitterly. "You think the big boss cares? He's probably sitting in some fancy office counting money right now." The word stung more than he expected. By afternoon, the manager arrived, loud, impatient, and already scowling. Within minutes, he was berating a server for being too slow. The CEO watched, his anger simmering. This wasn't just bad management, it was cruelty. And he had let it happen by not paying attention. Then, as he carried a tray of chopped vegetables to the fridge, he overheard the manager on the phone. "Yeah, labor costs are down like they wanted," the manager muttered. "No one's getting overtime, and we cut half the part-timers. Easy savings." The CEO froze. Like they wanted. Who was they? That night, instead of going home, he drove to the company's headquarters. The offices were dark, but his keycard still worked. He went straight to the HR department and pulled the files for the restaurant he'd been working in. Payroll records, schedules, complaints, everything. What he found made his stomach turn. Doctored time sheets. Lost overtime requests. A stack of formal complaints, all marked resolved with no follow-up. And at the bottom of one file, a memo from the district manager: reduce labor costs by any means necessary. Board's orders. The board. His board. He sat back, running a hand over his face. This wasn't just one bad manager. This was systemic. And he had signed off on it without even realizing. The CEO sat in the empty office, the HR files spread across the desk like evidence of a crime. His fingers tapped restlessly against the wood as his mind raced. Reduce labor costs by any means necessary. Those 6 words explained everything: the understaffed shifts, the denied overtime, the exhausted workers. All to make the quarterly reports look better. All approved by the board. By me. He squeezed his eyes shut. How many times had he skimmed through financial reports without questioning how the cost-cutting measures were being implemented? How many times had he praised efficiency without asking whose lives it was squeezing dry? A wave of nausea hit him. He thought of the dishwasher with back pain, the cook missing classes, the server afraid to lose her job over broken glasses. Real people. And he had failed them. The first light of dawn was creeping through the windows when he finally moved. He couldn't undo the past, but he could change what happened next. He grabbed his phone and called the only person he trusted completely, his longtime assistant. "I need you to set up 2 meetings," he said, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "First, with the entire board. Today. No excuses." A pause on the other end. "Sir, it's short notice. They'll ask what it's about." "Tell them it's about the future of the company," he said. "And second, schedule a visit to every major restaurant location. Under the radar. No warnings." Another pause, longer this time. "Understood." The board meeting was set for noon. He spent the morning in his penthouse, rehearsing what he would say. But no speech felt right. How could he explain that the man they'd trusted to lead had been blind to his own company's rot? When he arrived at the conference room, the board members were already seated, sipping coffee and chatting. They barely glanced up as he entered. The chairman, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, smiled. "Ah, here he is. We were just discussing the latest profit margins. Excellent work, by the way." The CEO didn't return the smile. He set a thick folder on the table. "I've spent the last 3 days working in one of our restaurants," he said quietly. "As a dishwasher." The room went still. He didn't wait for their reactions. He opened the folder and slid out photos, grainy, taken with his phone, but unmistakable. The cramped kitchen. The exhausted workers. The broken dishwasher held together with duct tape. Then came the documents. The doctored time sheets. The lost complaints. The memo about cutting labor costs by any means necessary. The chairman's smile had vanished. "Where did you get these?" "From our files," the CEO said, his voice rising. "From our restaurants. From our employees, the ones we've been treating like disposable machines." A board member scoffed. "This is dramatic. Every business tightens belts." "Tightening belts doesn't mean stealing wages," the CEO snapped. "We're breaking labor laws. We're destroying lives. And we're losing good people because of it." He pulled one last sheet from the folder, a resignation letter from the young cook. "I can't work for a company that treats people like this." Silence. The chairman cleared his throat. "Even if there's some overzealous cost-cutting, profits are up. Shareholders are happy." The CEO stared at him. "That's your takeaway?" Another board member leaned forward. "What do you want us to do? Raise wages across the board? Hire more staff? That'll cut into margins." "I want us to fix this," the CEO said. "Before we get sued. Before the press finds out. Before every decent worker quits." The chairman sighed. "Fine. We'll look into it." The CEO slammed his hands on the table. "No. We fix it now. Starting today." The meeting lasted 2 more hours. There were arguments, threats of resignations, even a muttered comment about sentimental nonsense. But in the end, the CEO won. New policies would be drafted. Wages reviewed. Managers retrained. And he would personally oversee the changes. As the board members filed out, some irritated, some thoughtful, the chairman lingered. "You realize this will cost millions," he said quietly. The CEO met his gaze. "It already has." That evening, he returned to the restaurant, not as a dishwasher, but as himself. The staff froze when he walked in. The manager paled. "Yes, sir, we weren't expecting." "I know," the CEO said. Then, to the stunned workers, "Could everyone gather round? I have something to say." They shuffled closer, wary. The young cook crossed his arms. The dishwasher rubbed his sore back. The server who'd been docked pay eyed him with suspicion. He took a deep breath. "First," he said, "I owe you all an apology." The silence in the restaurant was so thick you could hear the hum of the refrigerators. Every employee stared at the CEO, their expressions a mix of shock, disbelief, and simmering anger. The young cook was the first to break the tension. "An apology?" he scoffed. "That's it? You think that fixes anything?" The CEO didn't flinch. "No. But it's a start." He turned to the manager, whose face had gone from pale to sickly gray. "Effective immediately, you're suspended pending an investigation into wage violations and workplace treatment." A gasp rippled through the staff. The manager's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You can't." "I can," the CEO said. "And I am." He spent the next hour listening. Really listening. The servers told him about customers who treated them like servants, but worse, about managers who never backed them up. The line cooks described burns they'd hidden because sick days were discouraged. The dishwasher hesitantly admitted he'd been working with a pinched nerve for months, no health insurance to see a doctor. With each story, the CEO's resolve hardened. Finally, he made 3 promises. Back pay for every hour of unpaid overtime. A new staffing plan so no one had to work exhausted. A direct hotline to his office for complaints, no middlemen. The young cook still looked skeptical. "And why should we believe you?" The CEO reached into his pocket and slid a business card across the counter. "Call me in 1 week. If I haven't kept these promises, quit. And I'll personally write you a reference for anywhere else." The next morning, the company's legal team was in chaos. "You want to do what?" the head lawyer sputtered. "Voluntarily audit every location for wage violations? That's an admission of guilt. We could face lawsuits," the CEO finished. "We already are. We just don't know it yet." He pushed a stack of complaints across the desk, ones resolved by managers. "Better we find these before regulators do." The lawyer opened the top file, and paled. Oh God. By week's end, the changes began. Overtime pay appeared in checks, some workers cried when they saw the amounts. 3 managers were fired, 5 more put on probation. The broken dishwasher? Replaced overnight. But the real test came when the CEO visited the second undercover location, a packed downtown spot. This time, he posed as a new busboy. And what he found was worse. The downtown manager ran his kitchen like a tyrant. Workers flinched when he yelled. A server trembled as she counted tips, half disappeared every night, she whispered. Then, during dinner rush, the CEO witnessed something that made his blood boil. A teenage hostess, clearly ill, swayed on her feet. When she asked to go home, the manager laughed. "Walk out that door, don't bother coming back." The CEO stepped forward. "She needs a doctor." The manager turned, sneering. "Who asked?" Then he froze. He'd recognized the boss. 10 minutes later, the manager was cleaning out his desk. The hostess was in urgent care, company paid. And every employee in the building had the CEO's personal number. As word spread across locations, something unexpected happened. Workers started coming forward, not just with complaints, but with ideas. A bartender suggested a better inventory system. A line cook proposed a staff meal program. The old dishwasher from the first location? He asked for ergonomic mats to ease joint pain. The CEO implemented them all. But not everyone was happy. At an emergency board meeting, the chairman slammed down a report. Do you realize how much this is costing? Stock prices are dipping. The CEO didn't blink. Then sell your shares. A stunned silence. I'd rather run a smaller, ethical company than a profitable prison, he continued. Anyone who disagrees can leave. Half the board did. That night, the CEO returned to the first restaurant, not to work, but to eat. The young cook spotted him and hesitated, then slid a free dessert onto his table. For keeping your word. As he took the first bite, the CEO realized something surprising. For the first time in years, he felt proud of his company. The free dessert sat half-eaten on the CEO's plate when his phone buzzed, an alert from the PR team. Local news picked up on wage changes. Reporter digging for exploited workers angle. How should we respond? He typed back immediately, tell them the truth. Then he dropped a $50 tip and walked out into the night, bracing for the storm. The article dropped at dawn. Restaurant chain admits wage violations, CEO vows overhaul. By noon, it was trending. Comments flooded in. Finally, a rich guy with a conscience. Too little too late. Stock price tanking LOL serves them right. The CEO ignored them all. He was too busy fielding calls, some supportive, most furious. A major investor screamed through the phone, "You're throwing away decades of profits over some dishwasher's hurt feelings?" The CEO hung up mid-rant. But the real surprise came that afternoon. A woman stood in his office doorway, early 60s, sharp-eyed, wearing a fast food uniform with 20-year service pin on the lapel. "You don't recognize me," she said. Not a question. He frowned. "Should I? I worked your first ever location. Back when you bussed tables beside us." Her voice cracked. "You promised we'd always be a family." The memory hit him like a truck. Summer 1995. A tiny diner with sticky floors. Him at 22, vowing to build something different. Her name was Linda. She'd taught him how to balance trays. And he'd forgotten her. Linda slid a yellowed photo across his desk, the original staff, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning. Him in the middle, apron filthy, eyes bright with dreams. "You got big," she said quietly. "We got invisible." The CEO's throat tightened. "What can I do?" "Not for me." She pointed at the photo. "For them. The kid sweating in your kitchens now." Then she dropped her badge on his desk and walked out. That night, he dug out old financial records. The numbers didn't lie, worker pay had stagnated for a decade while executive bonuses ballooned. Worse, turnover was highest at locations with the most cost-cutting. A pattern emerged: the more a manager saved, the faster staff quit, and the more eventually had to be spent on retraining. We were losing money by being cheap. He drafted an email to all employees. Effective immediately. Base wages raised 20%. All locations closed Thanksgiving/Christmas. Every worker gets one free shift meal daily, *. His CFO quit within the hour. The next morning, protests erupted, but not the kind he expected. At the flagship location, workers defended the changes to reporters. "This guy actually worked beside us," a prep cook told a news camera, gripping his free meal container. "When's the last time a billionaire did that?" But at another restaurant, an older manager glared at the CEO during his surprise visit. "You're ruining us," he hissed. "My bonus is gone because of your generosity." The CEO studied him, custom suit, Rolex, manicured nails. "How long since you worked a weekend shift?" The manager had no answer. Back at HQ, the remaining board members demanded damage control. At least pretend this is temporary, one begged. The CEO pulled out Linda's photo. This is who we were. This is who we're going back to being. Then he dropped his bombshell. I'm transferring 10% of my shares to an employee trust. Starting now, workers get a vote in major decisions. The room erupted. That evening, as protesters, both for and against him, chanted outside, the CEO snuck into the first restaurant's kitchen, not as boss or dishwasher, but as a customer. The young cook spotted him and smirked. Back for more punishment? The CEO smiled. Best meal in town. As he ate, he overheard two servers. Crazy they're giving us stock, right? Wait till my mom hears. She said corporations don't care. The CEO scribbled a note on his napkin. They will now. The CEO woke to a voicemail from his lawyer, 3 words that turned his stomach. They're suing us. A group of major investors had filed an injunction to block the employee share transfer, calling it corporate sabotage. The news was already spreading like wildfire. He scrolled through frantic texts. Wall Street Journal calling for comment. CNBC wants interview today. Protesters at HQ, both sides. Then one stopped him cold. Sir, the dishwasher from location number 3, his daughter's in the hospital. No insurance. He's asking for you. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and despair. The dishwasher, the same man who'd told him about working with back pain, sat slumped in a chair, still in his grease-stained work shirt. His daughter, maybe 8 years old, lay behind glass with pneumonia. They said, no company insurance kicks in for 90 days, the man whispered. I thought with the changes. The CEO's hands clenched. Another broken promise. He pulled out his phone and called the head of HR on speaker. Carlos Martinez's daughter needs coverage. Fix it. Now. A pause. Sir, policy states. I don't care what it states. Fix it. Or pack your desk. 30 minutes later, a hospital administrator arrived with paperwork. Mr. Martinez? Your daughter's fully covered. The dishwasher broke down sobbing. News vans swarmed the hospital exit. CEO. Are you buying goodwill with sick children now? A reporter shouted. He turned, fury sharpening his words. That man has worked for us 12 years. His child deserves healthcare. All our employees do. The clip went viral within the hour. Back at HQ, chaos reigned. Half the executives were drafting damage control statements. The other half were updating resumes. The legal team paced, whispering about hostile takeovers. His assistant intercepted him at the elevator. The board emergency line's been ringing non-stop. What should I tell them? The CEO looked at the TV in the lobby, footage of the dishwasher hugging his daughter alternating with protesters chanting, "People over profits." Tell them to watch the news. That night, he made 2 calls. First, to the most ruthless business journalist he knew, want exclusive access? Come shadow me tomorrow. See everything. Second, to the dishwasher's daughter's hospital room. How's she doing? Carlos's voice was thick. Doctor says she'll be okay. Thanks to you. No, the CEO corrected. Thanks to you. You earned that healthcare. We just finally acknowledged it. A beat of silence. Then, they're saying on TV you might get fired. The CEO smiled grimly. Let them try. Dawn brought the journalist, a razor-sharp woman with a reputation for burying CEOs. You realize I'll report every mistake, she warned. I'm counting on it, he said, handing her an all-access pass. For 12 hours, she witnessed a shouting match with the CFO over wasteful sick leave. Workers crying as they received back pay checks. An investor screaming, "You're turning us into a charity." Her live tweet sparked a firestorm. Just saw a line cook ask why execs get bonuses for cutting labor costs. CEO's response, "They shouldn't." Mic drop. Fact, this radical wage increase still leaves CEO earning 200x median worker. He just admitted that's too high. Breaking, dishwasher Carlos Martinez just received $18,732 in back overtime. His reaction will wreck you. By midnight, the tide was turning. Hashtag CEO went undercover trended globally. Memes compared him to Robin Hood. A senator tweeted support. Then, the hammer blow, an anonymous email leaked to the press. Board members discussing how to remove sentimental leadership via hostile takeover. The backlash was instant. Employees at 5 locations walked out in protest. The CEO stood in his empty office, staring at Linda's photo. His phone rang, the chairman. "Call off your dogs," the old man hissed. "We'll approve the employee shares. But this ends now." The CEO smiled. "No. This is just beginning." He hung up and dialed his assistant. "Schedule a company-wide live stream. Time to take this public." The live stream counter ticked down, 10 seconds until he'd address every employee, investor, and reporter watching globally. The CEO adjusted his collar, heart pounding. Behind him, the journalist he'd invited raised an eyebrow. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted. Then the camera light turned red. Live stream title, "The Truth." He began quietly. 3 weeks ago, I washed dishes in one of our restaurants. What I learned broke me. Then he unleashed everything. Graphs showing how worker pay stagnated while executive bonuses grew 300%. Hidden camera clips of managers threatening staff. The leaked board memo, "Reduce labor costs by any means necessary." The chat exploded. Viewers skyrocketed to 500,000. Then came his nuclear option. Most shocking of all? He clicked to a spreadsheet. These cuts didn't even help profits. The numbers proved it, locations that treated workers well had higher long-term earnings. The cost-cutting was short-term greed. A board member's name flashed on his phone. He ignored it. "So today, we change." His voice gained strength. 1. Immediate profit sharing for all employees. 2. Every worker gets a seat on the board. 3. I'm cutting my own salary by 60%. The journalist gasped audibly. The chat went insane. Then, a surprise. The live stream suddenly split. Carlos the dishwasher appeared via video call from his daughter's hospital room, holding her hand. "I worked 12 years for this company," he said hoarsely. "Today's the first day I felt proud of it." Viewership hit 1 million. Backlash came instantly. The screen flickered, a hacking attempt. Angry board emails popped up on the CEO's monitor. "You're finished. Lawsuit filed." Then a worse alert, trading halted, stock plummeting. The journalist whispered, "They're tanking the company to stop you." The CEO did the one thing no one expected. He smiled. Perfect. He typed a command. New graphics appeared, a secret plan he drafted with lawyers for weeks. "If the board abandons us, employees will buy the company." Details flashed up, worker cooperatives, crowdfunding, billionaire backers who'd pledged support. The chat erupted in cheers. The board chairman suddenly burst into the room, face purple with rage. "This is treason." The CEO didn't flinch. He turned to the camera. "Employees of our company, it's your choice now. Do we let them kill what we've built? Or do we fight?" Phones began ringing simultaneously across the room, location managers calling in. The journalist grabbed one. Hello? You're live. A server's voice boomed through the speakers, "We're with you, chef." The old nickname from his kitchen days slipped out. What happened next became business legend. 87% of workers voted to unionize on the spot. 3 board members resigned within hours. By midnight, #WeAreTheCompany trended worldwide. But the CEO's favorite moment was quieter. As the live stream ended, his phone buzzed, a text from the young cook who'd first challenged him. "Guess you're stuck with us now." Epilogue, 6 months later. The restaurant chain reopened under new ownership, its workers. Profits weren't record-breaking, but turnover plummeted. Customer ratings soared. The CEO, now officially just head chef, still worked shifts monthly. Carlos's daughter drew pictures for the break room. Linda came out of retirement to train new hires. And that broken dishwasher from the first location? They kept it, mounted in the lobby as a reminder. Never stop listening.